Mr. Chairman. You know, this is a critical, I agree with the President's rebalancing strategy. It's a dangerous world out there, and I think our future, certainly the 21st century has been characterized as the century of the Pacific, whereas the 20th century might have been the century of the Atlantic. You know, over the last 30 years since China really has opened up, I've been blessed in my career especially to have lived there a couple of times in the region, worked in China a lot over the last 30 years. And I've watched the U.S. engage China, and I do agree with that engagement policy. I hope we can continue that. And they've used military engagement as well as economic engagement. And it's a carrot and stick type of approach. Today, though, over the last 20, 30 years, as their economy has grown and we have grown in terms of consuming their products, we've helped them develop a current account that's dramatically larger than ours, obviously. We've watched their economy grow, such that today we have $18 trillion of debt. China and Japan together are the two largest country holders, second only to our own Federal Reserve. I'm very concerned about our ability to continue to engage in a respectful way with China, given that the size of our debt. Admiral Mullen, who used to be our past chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said in 2011 that our own national debt is the greatest threat to our national security. With regard to Asia, and particularly China, how does that debt situation, the fact that they hold a lot of our debt, and I would ask both of you, both from an economic point of view and a military point of view, what does that do to our ability to deal with them straight up, particularly when we have tactical security issues? And let me give you an example. It's been characterized that we have these, I think you said 5 alliances in the region. One of those is Taiwan. We have an agreement with Taiwan that says if China invades Taiwan or attacks Taiwan, we have to come to Taiwan's defense and help defend Taiwan against China. But to do that, we have to go to China and borrow the money to go to Taiwan and help defend Taiwan against China. I just want to know, I want to know the depth at which our own debt situation is hampering our ability to really engage China in a way that we need to over the next 30 years.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Perdue, for the question and also for your work on the committee, which we very much value. I had the honor to accompany the Vice President of the United States to China within several weeks of the Moody's downgrade of the U.S. credit rating, and was on the receiving end of what could only be described as a condescending expression of concern and sympathy by senior Chinese officials. And I was very proud as an American and as a Foreign Service officer at the vigorous way that the Vice President pushed back directly in those meetings in Beijing. What he said was, no one has ever won a bet who bet against the United States. He said that the vast majority of bonds and the debt of the United States is held by the American people. And if he challenged the Chinese, if they wanted to unload, he would have no trouble finding buyers for them. I cite that as an example of the certainty I bring to answering the question, no. The deficit, the fact that China holds a significant share, albeit perhaps not as big as the share that Japan holds, of U.S. debt.
Well, they're very close, though. They go 1 and 2 back and forth. So.
But that in no way impedes our ability to make national security decisions vis-a-vis China that are in the best interests of the U.S. people. I will take the liberty, though, Senator, of telling you 2 things that do impede our ability to effectively pursue our policy in Asia. One is the uncertainty as to whether the United States will, in fact, succeed in adopting and ratifying the Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Agreement. This is, in my experience, the issue that our Asian interlocutors are most focused on and most concerned about. And in just the last 24 hours, the number of expressions of concern and anxiety I've received by Asian counterparts watching the developments on TPA have convinced me that concluding the TPP agreement in 2015 is the single biggest step that we can take to advance our ability to shape the Asia-Pacific region in the 21st century, and take the further liberty of associating myself with Senator Cardin's earlier comment that it would greatly strengthen our hands if the Senate were to ratify the Law of the Sea Convention. That is used against us to discredit our strong arguments on the South China Sea. And in as much as both former President Bush and other Democratic and other Republican and Democratic presidents have endorsed it, I very much hope that the committee will give that some consideration.
Thank you. Secretary Scher, I'd like to switch gear back. That's the economic side. The military side is that China has really increased their investments in their military such that they're really moving into a directionally, I think this is directionally correct, that they're spending about, they'll be very soon spending about half of what we spend on our military. The fact that we have a two-theater strategy and have had for some 60 years or so, if you just do the math, doesn't that give you concern that over time that puts us in jeopardy in terms of being able to project force in the region and affect behavior on the part of China?
Thank you very much, Senator. Chinese military spending certainly has grown considerably over the past few years. I believe last year the Chinese defense budget grew by approximately 9.5% to reach the public figure of $135 billion. I think if you included activities such as the purchase of foreign weapon systems in the Chinese defense budget, which they do not include, right, the defense budget could be as high as $165 billion. They are using these increases in defense spending to quickly modernize their forces and to quickly grow their forces. And we're seeing the effects of that not only in the South China Sea, but throughout the region.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I only have a few seconds left, but could you talk specifically about the naval fleet and their increased investment in specific aggressive ship, the shipbuilding program they have underway right now, and the long-term, the 10-year impact of that on the balance of power in Asia?
Well, Senator, it's clear that the Chinese are devoting considerable resources to shipbuilding. Their ability to build ships in very short time frame is very high. I don't have the figures at my fingertips, but I can get you those figures for the record. But certainly, their capabilities in terms of number of ships and the capability of the weapon systems on those ships has increased considerably just over the past few years.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.